What up, this is Tony Wiggins here, Alabama, where the Jaguars are supposed to be looking for players. They're also still looking for a coach. They're also looking for direction. I hope they find it real soon for you Jaguar fans. We'll discuss this and a whole bunch of other stuff here on today's edition of Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jags, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thank you for joining us on Locked On Jaguars. As usual, we're here every day. We're your team every day. And we appreciate you making us your first listen. We are also available on all platforms. And you do not have to pay. You just come, enjoy the content, YouTube, and everywhere else where you get your podcast. Senior Bowl time. We did a lot of traveling last night. Met up with a lot of people, guys that you see on Locked On Bucks, Locked On Washington Football Team, Locked On 49ers, Locked On Chiefs, Locked On Texans. We're all hanging out here together in Mobile, trying to get all the pertinent information that we need about prospects, players, interviews, find out what these teams are thinking about, and to find the next Deebo Samuel and players like that. A couple of years ago, Deebo Samuel came up here and blew the spot here in Mobile, and he was one of my favorite players. I'm going to try to find you some of those gems too, and you'll get that coverage during the next week. Right now, it's all about the coaching staff. The Jaguars coaching staff or the coaching search has taken more turns than the Tour DeFrance, and they're making a familiar turn now as they round back around and come back and talk to someone that they talked to about 34 days ago, and that is former Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl winning head coach Doug Pederson. Apparently, there's information that leaked out that Shad and Tony Khan were headed to Naples, where Doug Pederson has a home in South Florida, and they're going to give him a second interview. More information came out that my buddy Frank Frangie reported today or said today that now I read this, I didn't hear this because I was traveling, that Jim Caldwell also still believes that he has a bit of a shot and that his name is still involved in the process. And you keep hearing other names too, like Vic Fangio, if they're going to be a part of a bigger staff that belongs to Byron Leftwich. The other thing that happened today was Rich Bisaccia, the interim head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, interviewed with the Jaguars. He actually very, very impressive, in my opinion, with the way that he was able to gather that team and galvanize them. And see, this is what we always talk about. We talk about guys that can extract and bring people together, especially during a crisis, and not be the coach who actually creates the crisis like Urban Meyer was. So Bisaccia actually had a couple of things that they had to overcome. Obviously, the Henry Ruggs situation where a young woman and her dog lost her life because Henry Ruggs allegedly was irresponsible, driving over 170 miles per hour and causing that death. And, of course, he still has his day in court. But it's pretty evident based on what we saw on video and what we hear that happened. That's a very, very traumatic thing to go through. And then John Gruden being unceremoniously let go in in Las Vegas because of emails that were that most reasonable people would consider derogatory. So there was a lot to digest and a lot to overcome. And Damon Arnett, of course, with his situation. It was just like one thing after another in Las Vegas. And when you have to be really, really careful with the interim coaches, though, because we saw guys like Romeo Cornell take over in Kansas City, and it appeared that he was a guy who probably should have continued to coach and got more of an extension. You have to be real, real careful with a guy who can just turn something around really quickly when things are going bad, or if he's a guy who can really, really run the entire situation. But it was a nice touch with Bisaccia because when he knew it was his last game with the Raiders, after they lost, he sat in his hotel room and wrote handwritten notes to every single player, thanking them for their efforts and their contributions to the team. I just think guys like that, guys that have been around the league for over 2 decades, they just have a certain personal touch. And it doesn't mean that they can actually run their own thing. So you just got to be very, very careful. In terms of him being a special teams coach, one of the things I was telling the fellas here about today that I noticed that Jaguar fans are doing, and maybe all fans do it, but I don't cover every team. I cover the Jaguars, is everyone wants to be focused on whether the new candidate is a play caller. When you look around the league, the guys that are getting hired, a lot of them are not players. Anyone that got hired from Green Bay, Matt LaFleur calls the plays. Anyone that's ever gotten hired from Andy Reid probably shared play calling duties. Anyone that ever gets hired from Sean McVay will never be a play caller. Anyone who's hired from Kyle Shanahan is not a play caller. Anyone who got a job when they were an assistant under Doug Pederson in Philly, and I'm talking about Frank Reich, he was probably not a play caller. So you have to be very, very careful with thinking that calling plays is important. Anytime you do anything, if you do it well, it adds to your resume. But just because you're not the guy actually calling the plays, it doesn't mean that you can't be a successful coach. Because if that's the case, when you look at the Cincinnati Bengals right now, their coach came from the staff of the guy he's going to be playing against in the Super Bowl with the Rams, and he didn't call plays. So the thing is there's more to being a head coach than calling plays. And to break it all down, really, you think about it. You call plays for 3 hours, 17 games a year. That's 51 hours. Most people work more than 51 hours in a week. You're a football coach 24/7, and you're really, really a football coach during the season. These guys, some guys sleep in their office, man. These dudes work 80, 90, 120 hours, and that's probably twice as many hours in 1 week than they put in calling plays. You have to be a teacher. You have to be a communicator. You have to be a leader of men and a builder of staffs. And I think what happens is when you get guys like that, they end up learning from their predecessors, and they take that information and they take those habits and they bring them to an organization that's not used to it. So be careful with the play calling stuff, because Bisaccia actually was a special teams coach. And the last guys, you hear a lot about Dave Taub, but he never got a job from Kansas City. But Coach Judge in New York was a special teams coach. He's probably going to be back a special teams coach because he got fired. But the one who has won Super Bowls doing that is John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh was a special teams coach. And I had a buddy of mine who I'll probably see here this weekend. He told me, he's in the scouting world. He told me the special teams coach might be the smartest guy on the team. And I'm like, what do you mean? He says he knows everybody, because everyone plays special teams. Whether you're a gunner, when your team is kicking off punting, whether you're blocking, when your team is receiving a punt or a kickoff, and then on the field goal and extra point situations, as well as the 2-point conversions, they know everyone, and everyone from every side of the ball, they have to have an intimate relationship with them. And they're always watching. They're watching when you're on offense. They're watching you on defense. Is because they are the transitional coaches during those situations. So don't sniff on the fact that Rich Bisaccia was a special teams coach, because that does not disqualify him from doing anything more than that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Doug Pederson and what I think he might bring to the table as a Jaguars coach. And then I want to get a little bit into why this is such a roller coaster and why this looks the way that it does. And the fact that even if the Jaguars end up with a good coach, why messaging and the optics of this whole thing still leads me to believe that the Jaguars need to change their structure of their front office, which obviously they're not going to do, because if they were going to do it, they would do it now. So we got a little bit more than that. And then I'll talk to you in segment 3 about position groups that I think could help the Jaguars and what they might need, and guys that I will have a little bit of eye on. And we'll talk about that in segment 3. Right now, stand by for more of Locked On Jaguars here on a Tuesday. There might be less football being played, but BetOnline.net has way more odds and info for this playoff season. From scores, totals, player performance props, to where the next fire coach is going to land, BetOnline is the #1 spot for all things NFL betting in 2022. And it's not just football. BetOnline.net's basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC odds coverage is the best in the business. From sports right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline is your number one online wagering destination. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports and play your favorite games. BetOnline is where the game starts. And where your day starts, it starts here with me, because we make us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars, and we are eternally grateful for you joining us on a daily basis on all platforms and YouTube, and you don't have to pay for it. Just like I said, it's free, and we're your team every day. The roller coaster. This may end up with the Jaguars getting a really, really good ball coach, but that does not mean that this was due diligence. You know, sometimes you can fall into something that is good, but you kind of stumbled your way into it. And I think that's really what the Jaguars are doing, because take a look at the coach from the Rams, the offensive coordinator. He's being interviewed by Minnesota because they put in the proper request during the period where they had to do that in order to talk to him before his team was eliminated. The Jaguars will have to wait until after the Super Bowl to have that same conversation, if that's what they're going to do. And I'm talking about Coach O'Connell, if that's what they want to do. Maybe he'll have a job by then, though, because the Jaguars did not handle their business. It tells me that they really don't know what direction that they want to go in. And part of that is because they are being led or directed by someone who has a survival gene in him, and that is Trent Baalke. Trent Baalke is serving himself, and he's not really serving his team in this city. Now, the capacity that he has would suggest that what he's doing is actually serving the city, the fans, and the team. But sometimes when you're worried about self-preservation, that is not what you're doing. And I think to a certain degree, everyone in the NFL worries about self-preservation. This is a little bit different. And I was explaining to the guys here that Shad doesn't shake free from the past very well when he has to go into a different direction. And I said something on a podcast a couple of months ago that one of the reasons I thought that was because there was a fear of failure. And no one wants to fail. No one wants egg on their face the way Shad Khan has egg on his face for making the hire last year of Urban Meyer. He has egg on his face from when he hired Gus Bradley, and probably egg on his face from hiring Doug Marrone. He's had one successful season in 12 years as an owner. The Jaguar fans have a right. In fact, if the Jaguar fans were not weary of Shad Khan's ability to make a good, appropriate decision for the future of this franchise, I would call him crazy too, because he's never, ever shown you that he can do that. So I do think he has a little bit of an ego issue where he wants to get it right, but I think he has a fear of failure. And I don't think that he understands what he's really doing. And I think what he's doing is basically throwing pasta against the wall to see if it's al dente. Will it stick or will it not? And that's a bad way to run an organization. I told you guys a few weeks back that familiarity could be an enemy. And because he's familiar with Trent Baalke, he won't take a good hard look at Baalke's record. The last four coaches that have coached under Trent Baalke general managed team coached for one season. Urban Meyer, Jim Tomsula first after Jim Harbaugh. It was Tomsula, Kelly, Doug Marrone, Urban Meyer. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And in the agent world, when a guy like Byron comes in and says, yeah, I want to coach your team, and maybe Shad Khan says, okay, Byron, you want to coach my team? I want you to coach my team. All right, now let's get down to the nitty gritty. He's not going to do the negotiating. You know who's going to do the negotiating? An agent. You don't think that agent knows Trent Baalke? You don't think that agent wants to relay to the new ownership that what they really want is a chance for their coach on his first job to actually have a shot at being successful without having to worry about Trent doing what Trent has done in the past? It's not rocket science. An agent said a few weeks back that if his client wanted to interview for a Jaguars job, he would have to fire him in order for him to successfully negotiate for him on his behalf if Trent Baalke and the structure of this team was still the same. So don't think that these things don't matter. They do. The Jaguars have more salary cap space and an attractive young quarterback, and these other people are taking jobs in other places and appear to be at some point even leveraging Jacksonville to get their contracts. It is what it is. And at this point, I don't even believe, regardless of who they hire, they might have to find a super coach in a cave somewhere to overcome the fact that Trent Baalke is still going to be around. Either that or hire a coach that's good enough and strong enough and gets Trevor Lawrence to playing well and has the cachet on the field that he can go to Shad Khan at some point if Baalke starts to be a problem, and he could say, look, the only way we're going to go a little bit further is if you get rid of this dude. So somebody has to be able to come in here and have that sort of cachet. I don't think Jim Caldwell has the personality to do that. Now I've heard he's a little bit of a no-nonsense guy, but he's just a really, really nice guy. But I do think a guy like Doug Pederson can. So if they're looking at career football guys like Doug Pederson, Jim Caldwell, Rich Bisaccia, I don't have a problem with it. I really wish they would have taken a stronger look at Byron Leftwich and allowed Byron Leftwich to bring the people he wanted to come in here with. But alas, here we go, and it did not happen. Regardless, though, they're going to have some coaches that know what they're doing, and they're going to have some coaches that know how to pick and develop players. And we're at the Senior Bowl here in Mobile, Alabama, and I'm going to give you an idea of some of the players that I'm going to watch in some of the positions of need. Now, watch this. There's a trick. The positions of need for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You know what they are? Probably everything except quarterback. We're going to discuss it in segment 3 here on Locked On Jaguars. First, the thing I want to do is tell you that this episode is brought to you by RockAuto. Why is that important to me? Because I just drove 7 hours today, and if my car parts weren't right, I wouldn't have been comfortable coming down I-10. I don't know if y'all ever driven between Tallahassee and Mobile. There ain't much to see. It looked like National Geographic, things running to the streets. I need my tires right. I need my parts right. I need my engine right. I need all of those things comfortable in order for me to feel safe on the road. And at rockauto.com, you can definitely do that. You save time and money when you use rockauto.com. Why choose to spend 30 to 50 or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership, right? Rock Auto is a family-owned business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low and for every customer, every make and model. Now check this out. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices. All the parts your car will ever need are at rockauto.com. And all you'll ever need from me is to just be here every day, making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. I get to see some players tomorrow. I get to go to press conferences. I get to hear some and look at some measurements and see some guys that I think can help this team. Here's the thing. Depending on how they go and what they do, if Trent Baalke is still a general manager, I still believe that pick will be Aiden Hutchinson unless someone can convince him to do something else. But if they don't take an edge early and they need someone to go on the other side of Josh Allen, look no further than my man James. I'm telling you, my man Johnson at Florida State. But look, I don't know if he'll be around early in the second round. I think if he has the week here that I think he's going to have, what's going to happen is somebody's going to do the same thing to him that he did to Phillips last year for Miami, and they're going to take him a little bit earlier. Because he measured today at 6'4", a little bit more than 6'4", and right at 259 pounds. I think this is a real good weight for him because he'll be able to move around and do some things. And that's if the Jaguars don't look into the edge in free agency with guys like Harold Landry expected to be free agents. So you never really know what is going to happen in the draft until you pay attention to what happens in free agency. Now, I think the Jaguars have to address the offensive line. I've talked before in the past about Evan Neal. Evan Neal being the guy that's my favorite. I love Kenyon Green. There's a Johnson kid up at Boston College. I really think is very, very versatile, can play any of the 3 interior positions, can play guard until, at some point maybe Brandon Linder can't go anymore. So they can then move him inside the same way that they did Brandon Linder. So there are a lot of prospects that I really, really, really love, man, on the offensive line. And I think the Jaguars need to hit that area. I think they need maybe two of them before day 3. And then if they can find a developmental guy later to take another offensive line, because protecting Trevor Lawrence is very, very paramount. I would expect that the wide receivers here would also get a big look. I would expect that the Jaguars would look to add one in free agency if there's any more available, because it seems like they all are walking wounded. And I got to give my man David. David's sitting over here across the table from me. I got to find out about my man, the kid that got hurt down there in Tampa. I got to see if Tampa's gonna really, really spend that money on him. How that ACL injury with what happened with Cam Akers, they're going to look at the athletic profile of a lot of these dudes that got hurt. Cam Akers super freak, right? So he was able to come back really, really fast. And ACL injuries are not like they used to be. They're almost like high ankle sprains these days. So I got to see if Chris Godwin is a guy that Tampa will look to bring back. It's hard for a team, unless you're the Dallas Cowboys, of course, but it's hard for a team to pay premium for 2 wide receivers. And Tampa already pays a lot for Mike Evans. I'll tell you another team that I would use this same philosophy with. When you think about Keenan Allen and where he is and how much money he makes, and then you think about Mike Williams. Mike Williams is a catch radius guy similar to Mike Evans. He's not a burner, but he finds a way to get open. And you just got to put the ball in his area. You have to figure out if the Chargers' track record is so good with finding wide receivers, and they do it all the time. They're sort of like Green Bay and Pittsburgh, the way Pittsburgh used to be. I can't remember when Phillip Rivers and anybody who was playing quarterback for the Chargers did not have 2 or 3 weapons that they were throwing the ball to. You got to know if that team's willing to give a guy $80 million, because if not, that's your prime target. I would not trade for Michael Thomas if I'm Jacksonville. I don't know if I overpay for Christian Kirk, because he's a pure slot receiver. And there's a lot of those in the draft, and it's really heavy with those guys like Wan'Dale Robinson in Kentucky. But there are a ton of people that you can get that are in that developmental stage, and you can pay some money for them, and you can bring them here. We discussed earlier here if the Jaguars are going to re-sign DJ Chark. Do they want to make the same mistake and have Chark coming off of an injury the way they did with Allen Robinson and not bring him back, and then the kid goes somewhere else on a prove-it deal, and guess what? He proves it. So that, it kind of stings you when that happens, because you have a guy in your system for so long, and then he gets hurt a year before he's supposed to hit free agency. And it happened to Godwin, but I think Godwin is a really, really good player. So I'm going to take a look at the receivers. Jalen Tolbert. Now, I'm not in love with him yet, but Jalen Tolbert was my guy. He's from nearby South Alabama. I asked Jim Nagy about him on Twitter earlier in the year. I said, you're going to bring Jalen Tolbert? He says, if he plays like he played last year, we're going to bring in Jalen Tolbert. Jalen Tolbert's like 6'2". We always compare white guys to white guys and black guys to black guys. He reminds me of Adam Thielen. That's how he plays. Really, really a good hands catcher. Not necessarily a burner, but a really, really good player. So I'm going to keep my eye on Jalen Tolbert while we're down here to see if he's a guy that I can start falling in love with. And I really like this Butler kid that played defensive tackle at Tennessee. He's very, very active, hands, not quite as big as Chris Jones, but sort of reminds me of him because he flashes and he gets really, really active. And when you saw this weekend, when you saw the defensive tackles, not Eric Armstead, but the other defensive tackle for the 49ers, how active he was and how he got after it, that's how Matthew Butler plays. And we're going to have to take a long, hard look at Matthew Butler. I believe he's here. I know he was at the Shrine last week, so I believe Matthew Butler's here. So those are some of the guys that I'm looking at early, and I want to make sure we take a look. The tight end class is super, super deep here, and the Jaguars have for the entire existence of their franchise, always needed a tight end, and they still do now. All right, so that's what we're going to do, man. We're going to take a look at that. We're going to bring you more of this heat all week. We're going to give you reports. I'm going to try to get some interviews that I can inject into this podcast. And hopefully that's what we get done, man. So we'll see if we can make that happen, Captain. Until then, you guys keep doing what I say. Take care of each other, man. And get ready for some more action in a couple of weeks for the big game, as well as some of the action from this week. I'll be here until Thursday, and then come Friday, we'll go back to doing what we always do. But until then, you guys take care of each other. If you're going to make a wager this week, you better listen to Locked On Bets. You better go find out what your boy Q and Lee Sterling on the Locked On Bets podcast has to tell you, because you're going to need that before you go and do what you got to do. All right, man. Thanks for joining us today here on Locked On Jaguars. I'm Tony Wiggins. We'll see you here tomorrow, same time, same place.